Wrestling fans, are you ready? For the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world, let's get ready to rumble!
I'm back, so deal with it. Let's do this!
Finally, The Rock has come back!
Live TV is awesome. The spirit of Ultimate Warrior will run forever!
Welcome back, folks, to WrestleRant Radio for February 3rd, 2015. I am your host of the most, Graham G.S. Matthews, and while we were originally intended to go live today, due to an impending snowstorm for the second straight week, we had to do it in podcast form, but never fear, we have an awesome interview today, the biggest yet in WrestleRant Radio history, sitting down with former WWE Creative Writer and executive producer of Lucha Underground, the hit new TV show on WRA Network, Wednesday nights at 8. Chris DeJoseph, we had a great conversation talking about his time in the WWE, his vision for Lucha Underground, bringing in the talent, their long-term goals, and everything else in between. It was a great conversation. I'm sure you'll enjoy it too. So today's show is going to be broken up into two different parts. The first part is that interview. The second part is RJ and I, for the first time since maybe mid-December. It's been a long time that RJ on the show. RJ and I talk about the current state of WWE, everything else that's going on since the last time we talked here on the show, talking about NXT, Raw, Fastlane, WrestleMania, Royal Rumble, and everything else in between. So that's great conversation too, so you'll hear a brief kind of a cut between the interview and that, going on the phone talking to RJ about the current state of WWE. So it's a stacked show today. Hope you guys enjoy it, but like I said earlier, hopefully we'll be back on track by next Tuesday to get back on EC Radio for a live show at live365.com/stations/ECTV73. Our first live show in nearly 2 months. It's been that long due to all the snow and everything else, winter break. So a lot of delays and whatnot, but next week we should be back on track. But in the meantime, enjoy my interview with Chris DeJoseph and my conversation with RJ. Welcome back, folks. Graham G.S. Matthews here, about to interview former WWE Creative Writer and executive producer of Lucha Underground, Chris DeJoseph. How's it going today, Chris?
Hey, good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, no problem. My first question for you, of course, Lucha Underground is something unlike anything else in the world of wrestling right now, anything unlike you would see in WWE, TNA, and you would know because you used to work for WWE, like I said before, as a creative writer, so you would know firsthand. But before we get into any of that, just my first question for you would, of course, be, what was the initial vision for Lucha Underground coming in as the executive producer, and how did you get involved with it initially?
Well, I worked at WWE for like 6+ years, on the creative team, 7 years total. And I moved to LA. I was working on some reality shows, and someone had asked me for my resume and said that Mark Burnett was doing a show. And traditionally, when you're out here working in this business, you freelance and you go from job to job, show to show. So I just figured, it was another Mark Burnett reality show, and I was excited to possibly be involved in it. And I knew I found out that they were trying to do a wrestling show, and it was like two worlds collided for me. The best reality producer in the world, and wrestling. So it kind of ended up being a match made in heaven. And then as far as the planning stages, it started with a lot of people had different ideas on what it was. I know that Mark Burnett and Robert Rodriguez had a vision of what the show was going to be and how they wanted to present Lucha Libre in America, and Lucha Underground was born, and there's lots of things and input that I had, obviously, coming from the WWE and from wrestling. I had some experience where other people were not as experienced, but we also had AAA involved, so with Dorian Rodon, his input, Conan with as far as picking up talent, things like that. They were very influential in setting this thing up, and then Robert's team and the LRA Network wanted to have their spin on it and kind of make this a much different show and different than the regular old wrestling show you see that's out there, and wanted to make it feel like a Robert Rodriguez show or movie, and at the same time, the Burnett people have produced some of the best television shows in the world. So it just all kind of came together, and it was months and months of work. But then we decided to run with the format and run with Lucha Underground and try to do things differently.
And as a reality show, too, because not always do wrestling and reality always mix, and people think of, because I know in NXT, years ago, before it was the developmental territory, was supposed to be like a reality-like show, and obviously that didn't pan out. Total Divas, too, is something like, oh, that's not reality, that's scripted, but this is something that's completely different. It's not really, it is a reality show, and it has those reality aspects to it, and that's what kind of adds...
It really isn't, though. This is more of a television drama.
Exactly.
And that's why I think... it's a little bit different from reality. It's we had backstage scenes that are shot like movies, and wrestling that's colorful and different and wild and crazy and cool characters, and they have a commitment to telling long-term storylines, to telling good storylines.
Exactly, and that's what kind of those backstage segments kind of add to, and the way that you guys open the show, not with like your typical, not to like bash WWE or anything, but you see on Monday Night Raw, it's so formulaic. You have your authority promo, and when they're going to cut to commercial and stuff like that. Like, you guys don't cut to commercial during the middle of your matches and stuff like that. That's what makes it different than your typical wrestling show. And that was my next question for you as well, in terms of with the reality aspect and the things that you guys do differently than WWE, TNA, every other product that's out there. Do you guys strive to kind of be an alternative, or is that just kind of the way it works out?
I don't think I think when we started this show, our goal was to be different.
Mm-hmm.
And create a more compelling wrestling show than what's out there. And that was our goal. That still is our goal. And really our goal is to entertain fans and create new fans, and also give Lucha Libre, not only Lucha Libre fans but wrestling fans an alternative, and give them something that's pretty neat that they can get in on the ground floor and have fun with.
And along with Lucha Underground, NXT is one of those shows, like it's only an hour format, it's not 3 hours, not 2 hours, not a lot to digest. It's quick, it's simple, it's easy to watch, it's fun, and like NXT, like there's a lot of rumors that it's, the creative team only comprised of only a couple of people and stuff like that. How is the creative side of Lucha Underground kind of handled?
There are 3 members of that me included, that write the scripts and book the matches, and obviously we have to run these storylines and things like that through fast higher ups, like our executive producer Eric Van Wagner. He, everything goes through him, but and then also to the LRA network and their people, but the greater vision was signed off on, and then we just tried to execute show by show by show, and tell good stories. I do think it's a lot simpler to work in the environment that we have at Lucha Underground as a creative person, as opposed to the WWE, because I don't know, they are a little less restrictive in the things that we do, and trust our ideas and trust our instincts, and that has been extremely beneficial. At the same time, we have a team of a lot of creative people, so people are always offering their input and making changes. Ideas, we get ideas from everybody. Our editors, our producers, talent, everybody's actively involved in trying to make this show the best it can be. Because I know that necessarily something that I write may not be the best thing, but when a few different people sometimes chime in, you can sometimes find a better way to do it. And that's cool. Whereas at the WWE, it's all you're living that life on the road, and it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and then everything's channeled through Vince, and it's all micromanaged, and sometimes a talent you could have plans for, but something stupid happens on the road in a house show or something like that, and then you have to change your plans for that because that talent isn't fitting in with the locker room or whatever it may be. It's always something different there. I always found that can change course. Where here we're committed to telling long-term storylines. Obviously, we have to. It's professional wrestling, and people get injured and things like that. And sometimes things don't work, so you do have to make changes. But we had a long-term vision that we set in when we first started, and that's going to continue to be our goal.
And having experience in that field as a former creative writer for WWE, having current creative input with Lucha Underground, what tips would you have for anyone that's trying to get into that aspect of the WWE as a writer, as a creative writer, for any WWE TNA or anything like that?
Gosh, I mean, I guess, go in there and put your best foot forward. As far as tips on how to do their job better or how to survive, because it's the whole different can of worms. Especially in the WWE, survival sometimes outweighs your creative contributions. Sometimes relies on you to play politics and to survive that way. But if you can do a little bit of both, then you can have a good career there. But I guess maybe the main thing I would say to somebody who get involved is be prepared to be disappointed a little bit. Everybody comes in on that first day with this, big bright eyes, so excited, and then when you see them on their last day, they're a little bit different. So I don't know, and I can't really comment on what the creative environment is like in TNA. From my understanding, it's pretty cool down there, and everybody's pretty chill about how things go down. So I can't really comment, but as far as WWE, it's a tough life and a tough lifestyle. I don't know if things are set up the same way that they were when I was there. And when I was there was a lot smaller teams of creative writers, where now I heard they have a damn army working for them. So, I don't know how you find your way in that mix or that mess if you are trying to get into it.
Or like someone that's like an aspiring writer, or like someone that's up and coming, not someone that already has experience in that field. There's something like, what would you suggest someone to, like a younger person or whatever, that was trying to go to school to become a journalist or a creative writer, something like that? Would you have any tips for those kind of people?
I would go learn the television business. That's what I would do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would learn everything you can about TV, because that's really the most important part. And at the same time, learn your creative writing, take your journalism classes and things like that, but learn how to produce television, and I think you might have a good chance, especially if you got a good head on your shoulders.
Because at the end of the day,
keep trying. Never give up.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, that's exactly what it was. That's exactly what it is, a television show, more so than just pro wrestling. And you would know that, how far it's evolved into a sports entertainment program as opposed to pro wrestling. That WWE, that is. Speaking specifically there.
You go and work, you go and make your own, book your own set or something like that. That's not necessarily going to get you in the door there.
Mm-hmm.
You're more likely to have an opportunity to get in there if you have some experience in television. And for me, I've always said, once you get your foot in the door anywhere, you can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happened to me. I was an intern in the International Television Production Department. I got coffee every day for a long time, and people lunch and stuff like that. But I found my way through. In the WWE, I found my way through and found my way to a much higher role and higher salary eventually. So anyone can do it. You just have to put your mind to it. But above all, know that this is a television show. This is professional business. This is a large corporation, and they want the best.
And going back to what you were saying before on Lucha Underground and working with AAA or AAA and Conan and people like that, people who obviously have a lot of experience in the pro wrestling business and an eye for talent and talent scouts and stuff like that. What was the process that you guys went through to pick up the talent that you did, and guys like Johnny Mundo and Prince Puma and Phoenix Mil Mascaras? What was the process you guys had to go through to pick? What did you look for in these talents in order to bring them into Lucha Underground and say these are the perfect fit for our promotion?
Well, I think it really started, when we were looking at the show, I went and just made a list of people that I would like on my, ideal roster. And I know that Conan, and AAA, they had their kind of ideal roster. They had recommended some talents to us. Some of it came down to, we wanted young talent and at the same time some established ones. Them having masks, the first additional people coming from Mexico is very important. As far as Johnny's concerned, that was just like, I worked with Johnny a lot at WWE. I knew he lived in LA and had remained friends with him. And we had a lot of fun working together. We did all those dirt sheets and things like that. So I always enjoyed my time working with him, so I reached out to John and tried to get him involved. And, he came in and talked to us and liked what we were going to do. And he signed on, as far as Chavo, I had always trusted Chavo and always had a good relationship with him. And I knew that, starting this, we would need to have some people of name value. I thought that was important to try to get this show up and running, and at the same time help to get over the new talent, new characters on the show to rub them up against established guys. I thought was important. I also thought it was cool that if we had this underground lucha league, that anybody can show up, even guys who've competed on the largest stage up in the world, to come and fight, and that was kind of the idea, and that's how it went. Guys of different shapes, sizes, ability, look, style, it all kind of came into it.
One of the things that makes Lucha Underground so unique is that you guys have, unlike, with WWE, your typical pro wrestling, is that you guys mix the talent with the women and the men and even the smaller guys, the midgets, whatever you want to call them. You guys have the battle royales, and Eva Lisa's a part of them and stuff like that. You mix, you have intergender matches, and it's not something that's special. It's something that's really not any out of the ordinary for you guys, which is what makes you guys really unique and really cool. What was the mindset behind doing something like that?
Well, a lot of it stemmed to, watching Lucha Libre out of Mexico. There's lots of times where you have a tag team of a woman, a mini, a luchador, and an exotica or something like that, and they'll compete against the other one. The other part of it was, Robert's movies always have featured such strong female characters. So we kind of wanted to make that translate into Lucha Underground, and our idea behind this was, this is a TV show, and you watch movies nowadays. You watch The Avengers or Lucy or whatever, and they all have strong ass kicking. I hate that term sometimes, but female characters that are strong and aren't just there to run around and be silly. Girls that can actually fight and go out and want to compete. Mm-hmm. So we thought it'd be a little bit different type of presentation on it. And you play video games today or watch movies. That's how they are.
And also, as well, we were talking about before we went live here, is that Lucha Underground tapes out of the same place in Los Angeles. That's technically what it is. It's underground wrestling. That's what makes it so unique. The arena, the fans, the passionate, everything about the passionate fan base that makes Lucha Underground so cool and so fun to watch. Is there any plans at any point, and I know the promotion just got started, of course, but are there any plans at any point to do any touring outside of the regular place where you guys tape out of in Los Angeles?
I know that there's been talk about doing that. I'm not sure exactly when that will happen. Like you pointed out, we're just getting started. I think our 13th episode airs on Wednesday, so
yeah.
We're just beginning. So we're other companies who've been around 10 years, some some 60 years or however long, we're in the beginning process of this. But sure, I think that's a goal for everybody is to eventually have that. That would be awesome. It'd be awesome to bring Lucha Underground all over the world or to different places that we get to see these amazing talent.
And speaking of goals, what other kind of goals do you guys have for the promotion in the long term, in the short term, and going forward as the promotion just kind of gets started, as you were talking about before?
I mean, for me, my goal is just getting better and keep making better shows, and better wrestling shows. We were joking around the other day saying, we'll probably sit back and watch our first episode and then, our last episode at the end of the season, and we'll see a huge difference between it. And that's been kind of the fun of making the show. I also think our goal is to introduce cool characters and at the same time pay off storylines. Sometimes I think in wrestling, at least mainstream wrestling, that doesn't happen so much. and I always feel like, if you tune into a show and dedicate your time to it, you need to, at some point, be paid off for investing your time in that. I think that's definitely a goal. I don't know. I would definitely. I guess my other one is to have more people watch this and find it, and hopefully, I know that the wrestling community is very very loyal and very social, and hopefully they continue to spread the word about our show. I think you can sense there's a buzz about it. It's just getting more people to find out about what we're doing.
Oh, absolutely. Like I was saying before, like we were just talking about, it's only just getting started. It's only been around since October, but since then, it's so crazy. People are asking me all the time, are you watching Lucha Underground? Are you watching it? I've been watching since day one. I think it's awesome. It's something very unique, very cool, something out of the ordinary. A lot different, especially at a time with all the anger around the WWE product, no matter what they do and whatever, there's always going to be people that are looking for that alternative. And sometimes TNA is not that alternative, although they are the two biggest mainstream wrestling promotions in the U.S., along with Ring of Honor. Sometimes they aren't really that different from one another, and Lucha Underground presents something, it's really something different from what you're typically, going in to see in a pro wrestling show, and it involves that Lucha Libre. And not only that, it's not your typical Lucha Libre show, like we were talking about before. It has a reality spin on it, and it's very well done. You guys got the best talent in the world. It's amazing in some of the matches and angles, and it's only going to keep evolving over time, and it's just, like I said before, just crazy to think how far you guys have come in that short period of time. So I look forward to seeing it progress and, seeing and stuff like that and to getting more eyes on the product like you guys were talking about before. It airs Wednesday nights on the WrestleRant Network at 8 o'clock Eastern Time, so hopefully more people can check it out. But Chris, before we let you go, be sure to spread the word on the Twitter accounts, Facebook, where people can find you in the show and, stuff like that. Anything else you'd like to plug?
Yeah, that's it. Follow the show at LuchaLRay on Twitter. We have also Facebook page, YouTube. And if you want, you can follow me at Chris DeJoseph. Sometimes I'll maybe say something that's okay. But, I'm always trying to spread the word about Lucha Underground and let people know. I'm a wrestling fan who at one point lost my love for wrestling, and Lucha Underground has given me that love back, and I hopefully will give other people that same feeling. And we're doing some things that are more exciting and more fun than the average show that you'll see.
A lot of exciting things coming down the pike, especially with the recent signing. I won't spoil it here, but a lot of great things coming down the pike from what I can sense. I'm looking forward to it. But Chris, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it, man.
I thank you for your time. Stay warm out there in Connecticut.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Have a good one. I'll catch you down the road.
Latest Verizon ringback tone while your party is reached.
Of course.
Hello?
RJ, what's up, brother?
Nothing. What's up, man?
Nothing much. So we're live on the air right now, WrestleRant Radio. I haven't talked to you in about 2 months, and we were not going to have a show this week due to the snowstorm, but I had to have you on. You're all full of rants in regards to the Royal Rumble, Raw, so before we get into anything that I had planned to talk about, just going to let you rant away. So what's in your mind?
Just, like I said, we haven't been on the air for like 2 months around there. I think we had last show's right before TLC, right? I think it was, right?
Yeah, I think the week before TLC, yep.
Yeah, TLC was oh my god, I didn't think TLC was good at all. I'm trying to think. I think the only match I really remember that was good was Cena and Rollins, but that was good, and then besides that, the paper was pretty bad, and then up to the Royal Rumble, Raw was pretty bad as well, and then, as we all know, Roman Reigns won. I don't know why. I'm so mad still. I think it was stupid for them to have Bryan obviously get out early and then kind of make Reigns looked like he was getting rid of all the heels, but it was like Kane, Big Show, Rusev, like guys that really don't matter. So I don't think that helped him at all. I think the Rollins, Cena, and Lesnar match was amazing. I think it really showed what Seth Rollins can bring to the table. Freaking guy was lightning out there. I couldn't even tell you. Like that was one of the best performances I've seen in a while. And then after last night, they're doing the whole Bryan versus Reigns at Fastlane, so we'll see what happens there.
So on that note, last night, like you said, Triple H making the major announcement that at Fastlane, the winner of the Bryan and Rollins match at the end of last night's episode of Raw would advance to Fastlane to face Roman Reigns for the number one contender spot for the WWE World Heavyweight title at WrestleMania. Do you think that this put Roman Reigns' spot in jeopardy? Do you think it might be Daniel Bryan going to WrestleMania instead, or do you think the plans are going to stay as is?
Honestly, I think they might go with Daniel Bryan. I feel like they kind of teased some tension between Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns last night with him screwing Seth Rollins to go on to face him at Fastlane. Could easily have him seeing Seth Rollins screwing Roman Reigns at Fastlane and then having him versus Roman Reigns at WrestleMania.
I could see that happen. Do you think they could throw Dean Ambrose in there as well?
They could, but I think if they have him win the IC title, then it wouldn't make sense if he was in it.
True, yeah.
I think Rollins and Reigns are above the IC title right now, considering that, yeah.
Yeah, considering one's Mr. Money in the Bank, too, and one of them was just in the title match at Royal Rumble.
Supposed to go to WrestleMania to fight for the championship, so I don't think they're going to give him any IC title matches recently.
Yeah. Well, it looked like last night in the episode of Raw, in the main event between Bryan and Rollins, everyone was buzzing about the return of Randy Orton. It looked like there was a picture going around.
I saw that picture on your Twitter feed.
Yeah, it looked like Randy Orton, didn't it? Yeah. I thought that was going to be the perfect moment to have him return, and he didn't. This is like the 5th or 6th time, because I thought he was going to come back at Survivor Series, TLC, Royal Rumble, last week on SmackDown, Raw last week. Like, it's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
What,
I'm so annoying.
What do you think the deal is with Randy Orton? What do you think is coming back?
I think that, I don't know, I saw someone say, I think it was on Bleacher Report, it might have been on Twitter, but they're saying that there's somehow that maybe Seth Rollins can weasel himself into the match at Fastlane, and then maybe Randy Orton comes out and screws him of winning the match, and then he fights Rollins at WrestleMania. I think Rollins versus Randy Orton's a match that's inevitable. It's been teased for a while since they kicked him out of Authority. I think Randy Orton's pretty much this Seth Rollins is today's day and age Randy Orton, the guy that really was molded by Triple H, and now he's like the future. Like they kind of portrayed Randy Orton. So I think Rollins versus Orton at WrestleMania could be a classic and that'd be a nice rub for Seth Rollins to get over the Viper at WrestleMania.
It's a nice upper mid-card match, because like you said, it makes sense.
It's a match that doesn't need a title and it can draw money.
Exactly.
It's a hell of a match.
It makes sense. The match itself could be great. We saw a taste of that a couple months ago. The night that Orton got kicked out of Authority, they had that match on Raw, and Rollins won clean, which was great. But, they had a really good match that night, and that match is pretty much set in stone for WrestleMania. So what other matches do you see kind of taking place as WrestleMania 31 draws near?
It's probably going to be Cena versus Rusev at Mania, even though they're doing the Fastlane thing. I think that will obviously probably be like DQ or something at Fastlane, something that won't hurt Rusev or Cena. I hope they keep Cody Rhodes and Goldust till WrestleMania. I hope they don't waste that Fastlane. I hope they switch him to Cody Rhodes. I don't want Stardust. I need to switch him back over. Miz and Mizdow, I can see wrestling at Mania. Divas, I think they're still holding out the Bella Twins. I I think they could definitely do after Fastlane, do the Bella Twins, at Mania for the title. So I think it's other stuff that like makes sense. I suppose they're going to do the 30-man, might do the Andre the Giant thing again. Ziggler and Bryan, if Bryan doesn't win, and then be Reigns versus Lesnar, and then Wyatt versus Undertaker still up in the air. I don't know if he's coming back or what the deal is with Undertaker, so it should be Wyatt versus Undertaker that comes back, and it's Sting and Triple H.
Do you think for the Divas, because you mentioned before that they might do Brie versus Nikki, which has been, they've been teasing that for a while, but with Brie's heel turn and everything else, it's kind of up in the air right now. I saw some people making up the idea or kind of fantasy booking here that at WrestleMania you do the Bella Twins versus Paige and a returning AJ Lee. Could you see that happening?
I could see it happening.
Or a Fatal 4-Way?
A Fatal 4-Way, that'd be good.
Yeah.
Like you said, Brie Bella just went heel, so I don't, like, she's one of those people that, like, they're, like, kind of like in that Big Show territory now that keeps changing. So I think maybe they should just keep her as a heel. I think they work better as heels. They're kind of annoying as heels, so I think it fits them perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think at this point it's probably just best to keep them as the Bella Twins as a faction as opposed to them feuding because that didn't go too well. But then they had a good feud going, and then they ruined it by turning her heel. I don't really know what to expect from them going forward, but we'll have to wait and see. But you mentioned the Bray Wyatt thing, too, which is really interesting because this has been rumored for months now. I mean, we've been talking about this for a while, but it really started to, come to fruition a couple of weeks ago on Raw. I think last week on SmackDown when Bray Wyatt cut that promo saying that he doesn't fear anything that's living or dead, and it was kind of pushed really heavily last night on Raw, and Bray Wyatt has been getting all these victories over Dean Ambrose, over Dolph Ziggler got a clean win over last night, and Daniel Bryan a couple weeks ago on Raw, so they're really pushing Bray Wyatt. Do you think that Bray Wyatt versus Undertaker is going to happen at WrestleMania, and do you want to see it happen at WrestleMania?
I think that it's going to happen at WrestleMania. I think it should happen. Because the thing is, I feel like if he doesn't wrestle Undertaker, what they're going to do with him? I think it's kind of one of those things that they kind of have to have Undertaker come back, because if they don't have Undertaker come back, then who's he going to fight? Like, Dolph Ziggler again? Like, There's not that many other faces that he could wrestle against. I think they're kind of pushing him as one of the topper heels with Seth Rollins, so I think Undertaker makes sense. Obviously, people want to see Sting and Undertaker, but I think they'll wait till WrestleMania 32 to do that in Texas, because it's going to be probably the most attendance they've ever had. They can easily fit 100,000 people there. That's just a marquee match that people definitely would buy.
Yeah, I was speaking with someone just recently in that, like at the night after WrestleMania or at WrestleMania itself, you could do something like a Cena Rock, and you could set up that match 1 year in advance or whatever else. And, just do something like that. Like you said, they need to fill 100,000 seats, so they need some big matches for that show. So that should be pretty cool. But you mentioned Dolph Ziggler, and there's been a lot of rumors recently in regards to what he's going to be doing at WrestleMania. And they heavily teased last week over Twitter and on SmackDown and in that video. I didn't see it, but Dolph Ziggler versus Daniel Bryan. Now, do you think if Bryan loses at Fastlane that we could see that match at WrestleMania between Ziggler and Bryan?
Yeah, I think we could see that. I think just like Bray Wyatt, I think without them actually fighting against each other, I don't see anything really for Daniel Bryan or Dolph Ziggler right now. I think they're kind of like, when I was making my predictions for WrestleMania, I kind of had trouble putting it was between, if I didn't have Cena versus Rusev, I think that him, Bryan, Ziggler, and Ambrose, I was like, what are they going to do with these guys? I think if not have Bryan in the championship match and make perfect sense to put it against Ziggler, they could have one hell of a match. Another upper mid-card match that's not for anything, just a good match. Two guys that can put on a show. Just another match that doesn't need a real title or purpose behind it.
I think it could be a great opener, too. I don't know how they'll, structure it storyline-wise. Maybe they just want to steal the show like they were talking about on Twitter last week, but it's going to be interesting. I mean, it's going to be a great match regardless. It wouldn't change its place in the card. Like, if we were going to get Bryan versus Sheamus again, it would be in that same place. I mean, there's really no change there. It's only...
Yeah, I don't really want to see Bryan and Sheamus again either.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, both matches would be great, but Bryan versus Ziggler is something new. It's something fresh. We've seen Sheamus versus Bryan at WrestleMania twice before, so that's not really something we need to see again.
And one of them was 18 seconds, so...
Exactly. And one of them was a dark match, so I don't I don't have much faith that they'll do it right this time. And but that being said, you mentioned some of the other matches. Miz and Mizdow, their storyline has been really interesting the last couple of weeks only, in that just last night on Raw, Miz firing Damian Sandow as his stunt double, now his personal assistant, kind of doing the Alex Riley deal from a couple years ago. Do you think, well, we already kind of established they'll probably be facing each other at WrestleMania, but what are your thoughts on that angle so far?
I think that they've been teasing it for a while. Like, obviously, Miz is getting pissed off that Mizdow keeps getting more attention than he is, so I feel like I knew eventually that he was going to turn. I think they were going to wait more to WrestleMania season to try to get another match. It's not just a throwaway and something that can actually work with. I think Miz and Mizdow would be a great match. I think they could ruin it and put on the pre-show because I don't think it's that big of a buy that people. I think more people want to see like the Dust Brothers fight than obviously Miz and Mizdow, but I think it's a match. It's fresh, like I said, fresh match that people can get invested in because they obviously want to see Mizdow finally get over that hump of being like a second-tier guy. I think he could easily make a run with a U.S. title or IC title right now. I think people want to see him succeed after like that long run of him doing nothing, being like all those people, those couple months, like Vince McMahon, the space man, like all those random costumes he used to wear, and then finally he got his little run with the Miz. Now he can break off on his own again.
Yeah, I think he could be over as a singles guy when he eventually breaks away from the stunt double, from the Miz, and I think he could be, a pretty solid mid-carder, what he should have been coming out of the Mr. Money in the Bank cash-in, but that's another story for another day. But you mentioned the Rhodes brothers. Now, it was almost a year ago that we were talking about this matchup happening. This has been a rumored WrestleMania match for, I don't even know how many years, 28, 29.
30 years at least.
Yeah, right? It's been crazy long, and now it looks like we might finally be getting that matchup, but I wouldn't hold my breath because we were thinking the same thing last year and we didn't get it. After WrestleMania even, and they broke away, and he's turned into Stardust, all this other bullshit. But do you think it's finally going to happen this year? And do you think they're going to turn Goldust heel or babyface, or do you think they're going to turn Stardust babyface and turn him back into Cody Rhodes? What are your thoughts on that?
I hope they just turn Cody Rhodes back to Stardust back to Cody Rhodes and have him as a face, and then have him against Goldust with heel. I think Cody Rhodes would be another fresh face that we haven't seen in a while. And like other guys like Sheamus or Ziggler to go heel, or Dean Ambrose. I think they have other guys that can turn heel because they need really good heels. I don't think Cody Rhodes is a heel. So I think if they switch Cody Rhodes to face, they can switch a top tier guy to heel. So it kind of like mix up the heels and faces.
It'd be a nice way of Goldust putting over Cody on his way out, too, because it looks like his in-ring career is winding down. He's done a hell of a job over the last year and a half, but it'd be a match, a nice fitting match for Goldust to close out his career on, give Cody Rhodes that nice rub. And they teased it last night, too, in that backstage segment, which was really encouraging, where he called him Cody, and he said, "Don't ever call me that." So the storyline might be that he's trying to turn him back into Cody Rhodes, or something like that. But I'm looking forward to where they go with it. And like you said when we were talking over text last night, hopefully they don't waste it at Fastlane. I don't think they will. I don't have much faith in this company. They might throw it away in a Fastlane pre-show match, but we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully not, but that could be a nice undercard match for WrestleMania. But also in the time that we haven't talked over the last 2 months, we talked about TLC, Rumble, everything else going on right now. But also going on right now, we failed to talk about the TakeOver special back in December, which was phenomenal. So I'm going to get your thoughts on that before we move forward to the next live special next week. What were your thoughts on the last live special in December?
I think the last live special was Our Revolution, right?
Yep. Yeah, Zayn Neville.
Zayn Neville versus Sami Zayn was one hell of a match. We saw the debut of Kevin Owens.
Yep.
That kind of twist in at first. He was kind of babyface. He beat up CJ Parker and then came out and then turned on Sami Zayn, but it goes to Finn Balor and Hideo Itami beat the Ascension. A good match. I'm trying to think who else is there.
Charlotte and Banks, I think, had a title match too.
Yeah, that was a great match. Charlotte Banks, Charlotte for the title. That was a really good match. Like Triple H saying last night in the podcast about how NXT kind of gives the kids more time to work. That's what he was down there. The Divas get so much time to like showcase what they have and actually show that they have potential and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And what's the next one? The next takeover is next week, right?
Yeah, I think it's called, just confirmed yesterday, I think it's called NXT TakeOver Rival or something like that. But yeah, it's next Wednesday.
Yeah, and then it's Zayn Owens, Charlotte, Banks, Bayley, and Becky Lynch, and then the other match I see here is Balor and Neville.
Yep. Is that happening?
I have it right here. It just says matches. Neville and Galore.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's spoilers for this upcoming week's episode of NXT. Oops, because they haven't done the tournament yet. That's probably why. Oops.
Well.
Oh, well. The match will be great, though. I'm looking forward to it.
Wrestle against anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, that should be a fresh match.
Yeah.
See that again?
I think the last time I watched it was Neville versus Tyson Kidd.
Yep.
And Tommy, who the fuck did he wrestle?
I think it was Breeze. Yeah, I think he beat Breeze.
Yes. Oh my god. Tyler Breeze is terrible.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on Tyler Breeze? What do you think? Where do you think he's going forward?
I don't know. I feel like it's falling far. I feel like he was high at first, and then once like Bo Dallas and Adam Rose, even though Adam Rose really wasn't doing much in NXT, I think he was one of the top tier guys. And then once Tommy and Baron Corbin came and
Balor and yeah.
wins, and now what's his name? Solomon Crow's coming. And
Yep.
other people are getting more looks than he is. I feel like he's fallen pretty far from where he started. I thought he was going to be probably one of the newer champions after Adrian Neville, and then that kind of just never went to fruition. So now he's just kind of keep falling. I just think his gimmick really holds him back. I think that there's other guys that can do better stuff in the ring than he can.
You mentioned Solomon Crow, and it was kind of confirmed last week on NXT that his debut is pending. Finally, after all this time, he's finally going to be coming to NXT. I don't know if it's going to be the next live special or when it's going to be, but what are your thoughts on the debuting Solomon Crow?
I haven't seen anything much on him. I know he's just another indie guy. I think, like I said, with all the indie guys that we've seen come over to NXT in the last year, even year alone, with Seth Rollins, Ambrose, Daniel Bryan, Cesaro, Kevin Owens, Tommy, Finn Balor, Adrian Neville. We've seen so many guys over the years that come from independents that are actually, I think I'd rather see a guy come from independents that actually knows what they're doing and that they actually wrestle. I think, obviously, a guy like Roman Reigns, you start from the bottom and kind of like meet him to like the Super Cena booking that really doesn't have a background in wrestling. So I think these guys obviously been wrestling for long enough that they know how to put on a great show. So I think I really like how they bring in more indie guys that actually know what they're doing, kind of like a new crop of wrestlers instead of these old guys like Curtis Axel and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. What were your thoughts on Curtis Axel? He recently came back to NXT. His last two matches, I mean, they weren't bad, but the guy's failing to connect with the crowd. Do you think his time is up?
Time's coming up. I think a guy like Tyson Kidd benefited off going down to NXT. I think he's better than he was before. I think he needs that look, like, kind of like kicking the ass, like, get down there and, like, need to work your way back up. And I think he's kind of, like, finally showed what he has to bring to WWE. I think Curtis Axel is one of those guys that's, like, they can't just repackage him again. They repackaged him so many damn times.
Mm-hmm.
I know he's just so bland, and I think he's a guy that was just kind of like Justin Gabriel. It's kind of like treading water. I think Gabriel had more potential than Axel ever did, but I traded water for a while, then eventually just couldn't do anything with it anymore. I think setting him down NXT is just whatever. It's going to be the best for him now. So being a superstar every week.
Well, that was another news item that kind of surfaced over Royal Rumble weekend that got buried underneath everything that happened at the Royal Rumble and the snowed out Raw and everything else. The quitting, the release of Justin Gabriel. He left the company over Royal Rumble weekend. Nothing too notable. It wasn't like it was a mid-carder. The guy hasn't really been on TV at all. Like you said, he's been marginalized. He's been floundering on Superstars NXT main event for years now, so it wasn't that big of a shock. But what were your thoughts on Justin Gabriel, and are you sad to see him go?
I was actually a big fan of Justin Gabriel when he came out in his first season of NXT. I've always liked the high flyers and guys like that that can put on a show, and I think he's pretty much limited. Like I said this earlier on Twitter, that he's pretty much limited without the Cruiserweight Championship. He's a guy that, like, smaller, so it's not like most guys like that don't get over if you're not the greatest worker. He's not the greatest worker. He's not a ring technician, really. But I think if they had a Cruiserweight Championship, other guys would have more chance. I think he kind of was never going to get an IC title, maybe tag team champions if they just makeshifted the team and put them together. But I I think he did what he thought it was better for him, and just leave and just go to independence and work like that.
I was thinking shortly after he quit, do you think he could have had a more longevity in WWE? Do you think they could have done more with him had he been the one to break away from the Nexus or the Core, whatever it was, years ago, when people were really reacting to that 450 splash? He was like one of the group's shining members. Do you think they could have done more with him coming out of that group?
I think he had more potential than what they really gave. I think besides Barrett, he was probably the other big person coming out of the Nexus. To Dan Bryan wasn't in it. I'm trying to think of other guys like Otunga, Tarver, Slater, Skip Sheffield. Obviously, they repackaged him, and then Darren Young. So I think, besides Barrett, I think he was the second guy in command that people thought would be like the next up and coming guy. I think they hit the head with the kid in Gabriel tag team. They just never got off. No one really gave a reaction to him. I think it was they just were sick of Justin Gabriel, really. And Tyson Kidd, then they put him down to NXT, and then that really didn't work out either, so yeah, they got to cut ties, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, there was really not much more they could do with him as of a couple months ago. They weren't. I mean, he was a jobber for life at that point. I think the real time to push him was coming out of the Nexus when he was over with the crowd with the 450. I mean, he was like not the exact equivalent to Evan Bourne, but like on that level, and that people really only cared about his finishing maneuver. And he didn't really have the best of mic skills, but he did have some charisma, and he was really good in the ring. But like I said, it was kind of a shame they never really did more with him coming out of the Nexus, Core, whatever, back in 2010, 2011. He was damaged goods by the time he was cut loose, so it really wasn't that big of a shock, like I mentioned before. But you mentioned earlier the Stone Cold Steve Austin Triple H podcast last night on Monday Night Raw or after Monday Night Raw. What were your thoughts on the podcast? I thought it was great. I want to get your thoughts on it.
I thought the podcast was really good. I thought, obviously, they don't really break kayfabe, so they pretty much tell it how it is. They're not really going to do a storyline standpoints. But I thought it was really good. I think they could easily have another one. I kind of wish they talked more about present day. They only really talked about Roman Reigns, really. They didn't really get out of the Roman Reigns category. Then they talked about, like, them and the Attitude Era together. So they really didn't get too far in depth now. I like how they talked about NXT, how it's pretty much Triple H's baby, and that he likes how he can control, and, like, he knows who his target market is. He even said, like, young adult males, that people the hardcore fans that want to watch NXT, there for the wrestling, not, like, storylines and stuff like that. So he obviously knows who's marketing to and stuff like that. And then I wish he said that they asked the question, was like, who's Cena, is next Cena, Hogan, or Stone Cold? He kind of said, instead of saying someone like should have, he was like, there's plenty of guys like I could see becoming the next like star, but I wish he actually said someone. And then the only person I remember who said anything about NXT was Finn Balor, and he was saying like how New Japan Pro Wrestling, he was like, he didn't really know much. He just said go out in the turn and just wrestle, and now he knows like all like the cameras and the entrances and promo work and stuff like that with Triple H.
Yeah, that was interesting. I liked how he went in depth with NXT and how it was his baby and stuff like that. And yeah, he mentioned Finn Balor by name, but it really is his baby, and the way that he's taken it over the last couple of years has been, great to see it evolve, for lack of a better term. But one of the biggest talking points coming out of the podcast, and we talked about this over text a couple hours ago, was the China WWE Hall of Fame incident and whatever else, why she already isn't in. I personally think that she is deserving, like Triple H said. But I do agree with the sentiment that because of what she has done in the past with her porn career and everything else, that she might not ever be in the WWE Hall of Fame, or at least anytime soon. And Chyna went on to Twitter shortly thereafter, responding that she would love to go into the Hall of Fame, and she has no issues with WWE. She tried to contact them. They haven't responded back. But she also put a video out on YouTube back in like late 2014, a couple months ago, bashing Stephanie McMahon. So there's kind of some hard feelings there probably. But what were your thoughts on the whole Chyna conversation last night on the podcast?
When first I started talking about Chyna, I forgot all about that. She had that porn career. But I think Triple H obviously made like the thing like, I want my kid like type in Chyna, and then comes up and that she was pornography and stuff like that. But I think they kind of like, obviously that's obviously not, it's not against the law obviously, but I think obviously it's a choice that she made, and obviously it's not looked upon by the fans, but they let people in the Hall of Fame that have career criminal records being arrested and stuff like that. I don't know how they can really void her out of being in it just because she did porn. I think she should be in the Hall of Fame. She's one of the breakout divas in the early, late 90s. I think, obviously, his choice wasn't the greatest, but there's other people like that have been like Kevin Nash. Not Kevin Nash. Scott Hall is the biggest drug addict in WWE history, and people take Scott Hall and see that he's a meth addict or whatever the hell drug he was ever on, cocaine, and he's killed a guy. Like, you can't really you can't really spread it out. It's like kind of like weigh your options. I don't think her choice is worse than him getting arrested and being a drug addict or all his baggage that he has. And there's probably plenty of other guys that have other baggage in the Hall of Fame. I think they need to just get over it and just put her in.
Do you think it's a case that if they wait long enough that she'll be eligible to go into the Hall of Fame, or do you think it's like a Benoit situation that she will probably never go in?
I think they'll wait a little bit. I don't think she should even compare close to the Benoit situation. Obviously, great wrestler, wrestling killed his family. I think that's totally different. I think her decision she made was 10 times less than what he did. I think she definitely should be in. I think they need to just relax, look at the situation, and just let her go off there.
I think in due time, especially given how close she was to Triple H and the rest of D-Generation X years ago, and an integral part of history and whatever else, I do think that she will be in over time, especially if Triple H is in charge. I mean, I don't know if it's a Vinnie Mac issue, like a Vince McMahon issue or whatever else. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Like we were talking about, like you mentioned, why they didn't mention Rick Rude. Like that would have been cool if they talked about that. And Rick Rude is a part of D-Generation X back in the day. Not one of the most prominent members, but he was a part of the group, and he had an iconic career that belongs in the Hall of Fame. But I think guys like Luger and Rick Rude, because they left the company in the fashion they did for WCW and never came back, I think because they quote-unquote betrayed Vince McMahon when they jumped ship in the Monday Night Wars, maybe that's why they never really aren't in the Hall of Fame right now. Do you think that these people like Rude, maybe even a China, that's kind of stretching it, a Rick Rude, a Lex Luger, a China, might be in the Hall of Fame once Triple H eventually takes over?
I think they should be in the Hall of Fame. I think Rick Rude and Lex Luger should have already been in the Hall of Fame. They both had hell of careers, and they did much for both companies. It's not just the WWE. They did plenty of guys that never even wrestled the WWE in the Hall of Fame, but I think Vince is still sour over the fact that they left. But it is what it is, and I think once Triple H gets control of the company, those guys will go in. He was Taz DX, stuff like that. So I think Triple H, like you said, he even said last night that he's not there to burn bridges with people and stuff like that. He's not there with grudges. He's just let people in, and he's not at all about like the grudges and all this stuff against people from their past. So.
Well, speaking of that, too, another interesting part of the podcast was when he was talking about CM Punk, obviously not going as in-depth as Vince McMahon did a couple of months ago. I didn't expect him to, but it was nice to hear, because, when this whole CM Punk thing first developed, of course, like over a year ago, we wouldn't really get the full story until all three parties talked that were in the room, like Paul Heyman said. CM Punk, Triple H, and Vince McMahon. Then now, as of now, all three guys have now talked. Triple H a little less than the other two, but he still talked about and addressed it. Do you think his response to the CM Punk situation was genuine? And do you think those two will ever, quote-unquote, bury the hatchet at some point in time and allow CM Punk to come back to the company?
I think it seemed pretty genuine. I think, like you said, I think that he came off and said that he didn't think they really had any heat together. I think when he stated that Punk really is not great communicating and stuff like that, I think that obviously could lead to misinterpreting of certain stuff. They were saying that before he even made it to WWE, that Punk was pissed because he was an OVW and Triple H didn't even know who he was, so he took that deep, I guess, or took that as an insult or something like that. He said he honestly just didn't know who he was. I think that Triple H, like you said, I think he said if Punk's ready to come back whenever, I think the door's open. I think Triple H won't hold grudges like that, and if Punk ever wants to come back, I think the door's wide open.
You mentioned before they could have talked a little bit more about the present day aside from the whole Royal Rumble, Roman Reigns stuff, and that kind of stuff, and less about the Attitude Era. And were there any other aspects of the podcast that you would have heard more from, that you wanted to hear more from Triple H? Other things, other topics that you wanted him to address?
Not really. I just wanted to talk more about NXT and more about the future guys who he sees coming up now. Besides Roman, they only really focus on Roman Reigns, really. So I wish he talked about Seth Rollins and like Dean Ambrose more, Bray Wyatt, other guys that are coming up in the company. I wish he didn't just focus really on Roman Reigns.
I thought it was cool that when Stone Cold asked him what he would change about the current product or the current landscape of WWE, and that he said, "I wish Raw was 2 hours," which is a sentiment shared by everybody. So what were your thoughts on that when he said that?
I think he said it, you don't know how hard it is to book a 3-hour show, which I think that's why they always go over the same damn content and just the same stuff. It's always get the same matches. What you gotta do? You have to fill 3 hours of time and that's it. I feel like I also like how he kind of said though, like obviously people like get pissed off that Roman Reigns wins, but the WWE is an open book that the chapters keep unfolding as the years go on. Like stuff changes as like I don't know. I think he took the situation and said it perfectly. Like obviously people are pissed that Roman Reigns is gonna go or like won the Royal Rumble, but like WWE is always changing. It's never like the end of a book. It just keeps and chapters keep being developed and stuff like that, so people need to like relax and get over it and like stuff it's not always going to be like cemented that he's like the top guy. I don't know, I like the way he like defended their decision, stuff like that, honestly.
Yeah, he has a great mindset. He has a great mind for the business, and the way that he addressed a lot of the questions and what Stone Cold was talking about was really interesting. I loved a lot of the content and what they were talking about between the two of the best minds in the wrestling business. But we were talking about this earlier. Who else would you like to see on Stone Cold's podcast, or if they were to bring in Jericho's podcast, JR, I doubt it, but still, stuff like that. Who else would you want to see interviewed going forward on the WWE Network?
The two people I'd want to see, I'd want to see The Undertaker, and I'd want to see John Cena.
I think both guys would. Well, we kind of talked about this earlier, but kind of get it out of your own words. What would you want to see both guys talk about specifically?
Undertaker, I think I don't know what Undertaker really thought. They always talk about the streak and his career and all this, the evolution of the Undertaker character from like the Dead Man to the American Badass back to the Dead Man, and then I guess like his leadership. Like they always talk about how he's such a big like locker room guy he really was when he was wrestling earlier, and like his days. Triple H always kept bringing back about Undertaker, so I think they'd always talk about that, how he thinks the new crop of superstars will be, how their locker room is. And then Cena, I think they would just talk about his career over the time, why it went, like, have they ever thought of him going heel, like what scenario did they pitch to him, like maybe going heel, did he ever see himself going heel, stuff like that with Cena.
Yeah, I think
the new like top guy could be after he's kind of leaving or listing his role.
Yeah, what his years on his career would be and his timetable for when he thinks he's going to wrap it up, stuff like that. I think would be really great to hear from John Cena. Anything, pretty much with Undertaker, I think anything what he talks about is going to be interesting because I don't think we've ever really seen Undertaker in such an environment where he's being asked questions like that, as candid as Stone Cold has asked Triple H and Vince McMahon. So if they can get him to do it, I think it would be great. And it's not, I mentioned to you before that it would be highly unlikely, and I do think it is, but there is a chance of it happening, if only because in the interviews that we've seen with Triple H and Vince McMahon, they've kind of, obviously it's not kayfabe. They said themselves last night on the show that kayfabe is dead, but they've broken character. They've called him by his real name, Mark, which I thought was interesting. So it's not really out of the realm of possibility. And as Undertaker wraps up his career, there is some chance of us seeing that down the line. It could make for huge numbers for the WWE Network. But, one quick note here before we wrap it up. Last night of the Royal Rumble, or last Sunday, Bubba Ray Dudley, Bully Ray from TNA, making his grand WWE return. What were your thoughts on that, and do you see him sticking around?
I thought I was going to see Bubba Ray back in WWE. I was more excited when I saw the Boogeyman, honestly.
The Boogeyman.
I remember the Boogeyman so much. I don't know. Bubba Ray was kind of like getting the water when I saw it. Like he was kind of like dying down when I started watching wrestling, and then he went off on his own. Never was really the best singles guy, and then him and Devo both left. But I loved the Boogeyman, so I thought it was wicked funny when the Boogeyman came out. I also thought it didn't really like help because I think pretty sure both of them got up pretty damn fast. But it also kind of didn't like help. I don't know, I think it's stupid to bring guy back to throw him right over the top rope, but I think if they bring Devon back, they can have a 3D run again. But I don't think I can see Bubba Ray or coming back and be a singles guy because no one's going to really think of him as Bully Ray. He's always going to be Bubba Ray. So
Yeah, I could see that happening. I think there's a bigger chance of them reuniting Team 3D or the Dudley Boys, whatever, in WWE as opposed to Bubba Ray being brought back as a heel guy, as a singles guy, or as Bully Ray, because as much as some people want to see that, and I would love to see it, I think it could be great, but as I've said time and time again, I don't think it would fly in the current...
I don't think it'd work either.
Yeah, I don't think it would work in the PG product of WWE, because at least in TNA, I mean, say what you will about the company, but at least they gave him no limits as far as where he can go with his character. And how everything is so scripted and so minuscule with WWE, and everything has to be exactly the way they want it. I don't think it would go and fly in WWE. I would love to see them try it out, but I just don't see it happening. But yeah, it should be cool if they can come to an agreement with WWE, sign a Legends deal or something like that. It'd be great to see him both and Devon back in WWE. So on that note, brother, thanks for coming on the show. Always appreciate it. But even though we're on the phone, as always, going to allow you to do your shout-outs, your shameless plugs, anything you got for us.
All right. I always go to shout-outs. I'm going to Cam, not Jeff. Jeff's not here with us anymore, so no Jeff. Molly, Jamie, Sus. And if I didn't say your name, too bad. At Raymond_Marceau on Twitter. At WrestleRant. At nextera.weebly.com. I think that's what it is. Or .net. I think it's nexterawrestling.net now, people. I think they changed it. Besides that, it's off the gram.
Sounds good, man. So hopefully we'll be back to being live next week if the snow holds up and we don't get canceled again. But
This snowstorm's getting ridiculous.
Yeah, it's our 4th snow day in the last week. It's absolutely ridiculous here in the Northeast right now, but hopefully we'll be back to next week, and we'll talk about our NXT TakeOver predictions with Fastlane coming up, WrestleMania, so it should be cool. So I'll talk to you soon, man. Thanks for coming on. See you, man. Thanks once again to RJ and Chris for joining me for a great show here today, especially to Chris. Had an awesome interview, great time talking to him, really cool guy. So like I mentioned earlier when I was talking to him, if you're not already watching Lucha Underground, Wednesday nights, El Rey Network, you can follow them on Twitter, Lucha El Rey, at Chris DeJoseph on Twitter. It's a great program I've been watching since day one. Definitely go check it out. Definitely worth your time. It's really awesome stuff. Definitely different than anything you'll see in WWE or TNA. But like I mentioned earlier, we should be back on track for next Tuesday, February 10th, to go back live on EC Radio at live365.com/stations/ECTV73. So in the meantime, in the between time, you guys can find me on Twitter at WrestleRant, on Facebook at Graham GSM Matthews, nextairwrestling.weebly.com, where you listen to the show right now, the only place where you can listen to WrestleRant Radio and catch my reviews of Raw, SmackDown, Impact, Main Event, Superstars, all the pay-per-views, some other stuff thrown in there, some exclusive columns, John's Jargon, who I talked to last week, a lot of great stuff on the website. If you want to check that out, and all the back issues, all the back editions of WrestleRant Radio dating back to October of 2013, if you want to listen to all the old episodes of this show. So in the meantime, folks, have a great week, and I'll speak to you guys next Tuesday. Thanks again for listening.